All right. Raymond, do you want to kick us off this evening and then we'll turn things over? Oh, Raymond, you are muted, sir.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Raymond Hess, hopefully a familiar face to most, if not all of you here. Again, as always, we thank you for joining us this evening. We do value your time and input, and as we move this initiative forward. We do have quite a few things to talk about tonight, so I don't want to spend too much time on introductions, but I think if you wouldn't mind, we do have a new staff member with us tonight, which we are all super excited about. And if for no other reason for his benefit alone, if we could go around and do a quick round of introductions. So maybe I'll pass the torch to Suzanne, and then if everyone could just pass the torch as you go around.
Suzanne Flowers, Transportation Program Manager for the City of Ann Arbor. Stacy.
Stacy Meekins with Sam Schwartz. I am the project manager of this effort on the consultant side. Cynthia.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cynthia Redinger, and I am one of the city's transportation engineers. And I'll pass it to Seth.
Hi, my name is Seth Peterson, and I serve on the board of the Washtenaw Bicycling and Walking Coalition, although we have recently renamed ourselves Walk Bike Washtenaw, so still getting used to that one. And I'll pass it to Larry, my cohort.
Yeah, also on the board of Walk Bike Washtenaw. And pass it to Julie.
Hi, I serve on the Transportation Commission, and I'm the honorary co-chair of this committee. No, chair maybe? I'm the honorary chair, I believe. And I pass it to Jonathan. Jonathan, you're muted.
Trevor and I go way back. Trevor is a graduate of our program. Hi, Trevor. What's your title with the city? I'm thrilled to learn that you're working for the city.
Transportation Program Manager. I'm going to be working alongside and with Suzanne.
Terrific.
And so support on this stuff, and then I'll be leading some other initiatives.
Great. And I'll pass it to Brett.
I'm Brett Hadamaki, and I am a member of the city's Transportation Commission. I'll pass it to
You muted too early. We didn't catch who you were passing to, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll pass it to Devin. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Devin Ackman. I'm on a couple different committees, but I think I'm ultimately here because I'm on the Ann Arbor Equitable Engagement Steering Committee. And I think I'll pass it to Ken.
Hi, I'm Kent Anderson. I'm a planner at the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. Is there anybody left? Is there a Sarah?
Yep, just me. Hi, I'm Sarah Lukapakan. I'm a transportation planner with AECOM. We're a sub-consultant to Sam Schwartz on this project on the consultant side of things.
And Trevor, tell us.
And I'll just introduce myself. It's a thrill to be here at the City of Ann Arbor. My name is Trevor Bryden. I've lived in the City of Ann Arbor for about 15 years or so, and came to Ann Arbor with looking for the master's in urban planning. Jonathan Levine was one of my transportation professors, transportation economics, and also taught to me the word tautology as we were pitching him ideas for a professional project back in the day. Help us work out and get a straight project there. Since then, I've worked with the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments on in transportation planning, freight planning, on motorized planning, all of the odd modes, as well as the long range plan for SEMCOG. So Ann Arbor's doing some really exciting things, leading the way in many ways, and so I'm excited to be a part of this work and in support of this team.
All right, so Suzanne, do you want me to turn it back over to you, or over to Stacy, or?
Yeah, I think we can just turn it over to Stacy, and we can kick things off. Thank you.
Thanks. Cynthia, I did also just forward my link to Sid Shaw. So if you see another Stacy pop up, if you could let them in. Thank you all for being here this evening. I am going to actually kick it back to the city in a moment, but I think we know all of the rules of engagement here for this committee. Raymond, feel free to stop me if there's anything that you do want to go over, but I think that this is all pretty common knowledge by now, and I don't see any attendees on the public side that we need to go through the phone access for.
And Stacy, your screen isn't sharing right now. If you would like to be.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Sorry about that. So we just went through the kind of intro slides where we have the meeting norm and technology overviews. We will be posting both the recording and some meeting notes following the meeting to the city's website, so you guys can access those. We do have quite a bit on the agenda tonight, and if we don't get through it all, that's fine. We have some other options for follow-up meetings. I know that you guys already have some scheduled, so we can come back to you in November and December for anything that we don't get through tonight. But we've just gone through introductions. Suzanne and/or Raymond will take you through some discussion items about the committee itself. And then we'll spend the bulk of the time running through the speed management program that we've drafted and put together. We have an online story map that I'd like to run through. And then would like to hear your feedback on that. And we'll go over an annual report outline that's just a framework right now. And that's something that we'll come back to you in more depth with at a subsequent meeting. Similar for Safe Systems introduction, it's really just the beginnings of what we're starting to work on, and it's kind of like a teaser for what you'll hear in future meetings. Suzanne, did you want to take this?
Yep. Just as a quick reminder, all of you should have received calendar invites already to the November 14th and December 12th dates. We are still planning on holding those meetings and discussing information provided by Sam Schwartz. As you saw, where there is a lot still to go through with the contract. And so we would just want to keep you as committee members apprised of those updates. And then I would like to propose and take a minute or two to discuss our meeting cadence and timing for 2023. The intent was to move to an every other month meeting and do that on the last Monday of the month at 7. When I look at kind of our city calendar, that seems to be an opportunity for the least amount of conflict. I'm not saying that there may not be some conflicts, but I think if we meet every other month, that would provide for robust conversation and project updates. And so I'd just like to open the floor for that communication and see what people think of that, and give you all a moment to process.
And Suzanne, just a quick clarification too. We do mean the last month or last Monday, right? Not the fourth Monday, correct?
Correct, the last Monday of the month. Yes, thank you, Raymond. Are there any strong opinions and or feelings about that? And then oh, sorry. Thank you, Julie.
I was just gonna say, it sounds fine to me. I wonder, when you say every other month, does that mean like January and then March, or February and then April?
Yeah, that's the one point I wanted to bring up. If we were to meet in January, the last Monday of the month in March coincides with general Washtenaw County public schools spring break. So that could be a conflict. But if we meet in January, then we could, or in February, I'm sorry, if we meet in February, we could kind of miss some of that. So if there are any other considerations or thoughts that we should bring forward. Okay, well,
I think this will work for me.
okay. Is the desire of the group to maybe start this in January or February to go to the every other month? So we have a meeting obviously set for November and December. We could potentially miss January and then go to February. That could be one option.
This is Devin. I think either or from my end. I just wonder if we start in January, is there anything kind of pressing on the agenda that you need ready by spring that would give us an extra month? So.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point. I think, you know, potential topics would be the additional items that we need to wrap up with Sam Schwartz. And then I think conversations about upcoming construction season and or quick builds would be pertinent to having as a kind of winter discussion. Okay, well, I'm hearing that everyone is amenable to an every other month. And we can try starting off in February. So we will meet, like I said, in November and December. We will skip January and then we'll go to the every other month with a meeting in February of, I can't believe I'm going to say this, 2023. Thank you. And then I am going to turn this next slide over to Raymond.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. And Jonathan, this is meant to kind of address some of the sidebar that you and I have had along with Suzanne. And allow me to paraphrase, and then I'll let you maybe use your own words to describe the situation. Jonathan was asking some questions within the last couple of weeks about the State Street project and some of the design elements, in particular, some of the bike facility design that's being incorporated in that project. And Jonathan was suggesting that this Vision Zero implementation committee be afforded the opportunity to comment on some of those design elements of projects. So, because, you know, there is some alignment, obviously, with, you know, projects that are in the queue moving forward and what we're trying to accomplish with Vision Zero. So maybe let me pause real quickly there, Jonathan, and let me turn it over to you, because I don't want to paraphrase,
Sure.
you know, some of the concerns you raised. I wanted to, you know, give you the opportunity to, you know, say in your own words what you were thinking, and then we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm. So this would be an example of the kind of issue that my expectation was that this committee would in fact deal with. So the Vision Zero plan specifies or calls for an all ages and abilities bike facility for State Street. So that would be implementing that would seem to be squarely in the wheelhouse of, to me, of the Vision Zero implementation committee. So we are a subcommittee of the Transportation Commission, and presumably we have, the Transportation Commission deals with the entire city. We're presumably dealing with the more narrow question of implementation of Vision Zero. So decisions to implement or not implement, or alternatively to delay major elements and an all ages and abilities facility on State Street I would think would be a major element of the plan. I would have expected would come to the commission, to our group, for discussion, not necessarily at the level of this block design, that block design, but what is it that we're trying to achieve? What compromises are in store? My experience was I read about all of this in the paper, and I thought to myself, well, gosh, I'm on the implementation subcommittee. Why am I reading about this in the Ann Arbor News? I would have appreciated an opportunity to talk conceptually about, as the project went from conceptually a two-way cycle track as part of the tree line trail, to lanes on either, protected lanes on either side of State Street, and now what we're talking about, at least in the immediate term, unprotected lanes. I understand that there are compromises that need to be made, but it seems to me, given our charge, which is one of our charges, scope of work, advise on strategies to achieve Vision Zero, project prioritization criteria and implementation timeline. It seems like if these big decisions are made and they don't come to us, we don't have the ability to fill our charge. I note that what Raymond is, these 3 points that Raymond is suggesting, staff will notify BZIC members when engagement opportunities are available for capital projects. Well, that was I didn't quite understand that, because I always thought of this committee as an engagement opportunity. So I don't think of it as a place where I can learn about engagement opportunities. I think about it as a place where we all can engage, and specifically engage in our role as specialists. So we're not members of the public. We're also members of the public, of course, but I think we land in this committee because we have special expertise or special institutional affiliation with transportation. My interpretation of the charge was that it's asking us to get involved in those roles and not strictly as members of the public. Back to Raymond.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, for that context. I wanted to, you asked for this to be on the agenda, so I wanted to definitely give you the opportunity to, say in your words what you had in mind, and I appreciate all of that context and background. And conceptually, I actually don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think, the charge that we have is trying to, well, there are a couple things, first of all. So, as you mentioned, the Vision Zero Implementation Committee is a subcommittee of the Transportation Commission. And so really what we were trying to get the Vision Zero Implementation Committee to help us chart a path forward to be less necessarily reactionary to projects, but really help forge a list of projects. So, when we talk about project prioritization and implementation timelines, that's actually what this group is helping us with. The work that Sam Schwartz has come together, the Vision Zero Quick Build Year 1, transitioning to the Vision Zero Quick Build Years 2 and beyond, as well as the speed management. All of that is, you're helping us formulate a slate of projects to be considered. As a reminder, we do have $2 million in ARPA funds to put towards projects. And so the work you are helping us with right now is going to be put into action. Now, one of the things that I think when we talk about, the ability for this committee or subcommittee to weigh in on individual project elements, again, I'm not opposed to that. I think it's just more a function of how we can utilize our time together. There are a lot of city projects that happen. Just looking at the last month update that we gave the Transportation Commission, there were 18 projects. And if we were to spend a great deal of time going into any one of those at every meeting, we wouldn't have time to really chart that path forward on these Vision Zero implementation projects. So what we had suggested, what we had formulated are these, recommendations that are on screen, and I wanted to see if, they resonate with folks. So, the first one is anytime there's any sort of engagement opportunity, we can forward that along to the Vision Zero Implementation Committee so that you're aware of it. Even if it's not a project that is of, interest to you, you can post it on social media, you can tell others about it in case they might be interested. Then secondly, the report that I alluded to and that Jonathan alluded to is this, we give the Transportation Commission a monthly report on all things transportation. It even includes a passage from the RIDE and some other external agencies, if they, like the DDA, if they give us some updates to be incorporated into that. We're happy to share that with you on a monthly basis. And then what you can do is, if there's something on that list that piques your interest that you want to talk about in more detail, any one of you can just request, hey, at the next VZIC meeting, can we talk about State Street in a little bit more detail? And then maybe depending upon the level of depth that you want to go into, we'll determine if, I can handle it, or one of, the folks who are on this call can handle it, or if we need to bring in the project manager. So, I'm not trying to, stiff arm bringing projects to this committee. I think we are working on a whole slate of projects. It's just the magnanimity of all the different things that are going on, trying to keep us focused on developing a path that really gets us to Vision Zero. And, I don't disagree with Jonathan's point too, that an all ages and abilities bike facility is identified in the transportation plan, is, aligned with Vision Zero, aligned with the transportation plan itself. But that could be said of almost any project we touch, including the entirety of the resurfacing program and so forth and so on. So it's really just a balance of trying to get the things in front of this committee that can, forge that path forward, while at the same time not getting too bogged down in a bunch of project details. And I'm not trying to, circumvent the opportunity for this committee to do that. I'm trying to figure out to what level, frequency, and depth we want to go into a whole slate of projects at every given meeting. The other thing to note too is, at some point, once the work with Sam Schwartz concludes, which is in the not too distant future, probably in the first quarter or so of 2023, we will re-examine as a subcommittee how we want this subcommittee to operate in the future. So right now we are, helping to develop a process to identify, speed management, which you'll hear from Stacy tonight. We're also, finalizing a slate of projects for Vision Zero Quick Build years 2 and beyond. But when that work is done and we go to implement those, then we have an opportunity for this subcommittee to help guide and steer implementation of those projects and or look at other projects and, whether they're incorporating safety components in all ages and abilities bike or pedestrian facilities as well. So I just wanted to put that on the table, see how that's resonating with folks. We're open to things. We value your time. We don't want to put more meetings on your calendar, but at the same time, if you want to discuss things in more detail, we have opportunities to do that as well. So let me pause there and see if anyone has any response or reactions to that.
I guess I'll pipe up, and I think that sounds like a fine idea. Not in the context of whatever micromanaging staff or anything, because I know you guys are on top of stuff as best you can. But as we speak to the larger issues that are going to be challenges going forward with many projects, we can sort of look at one and say we've got these issues, and if we're going to run into these on similar projects down the road, how can we set up a system that can help us be more successful overall?
So with your, thank you, Seth, for that. So for, with your approval, let's give this a shot with what we're committed to on screen, that we will be more diligent. And admittedly, we haven't done probably the best job of looping you into some of the communication streams that are out there today. We'll make it a point to do so. Anytime there is an announcement about a project, we'll be sure to forward that on to the commission or the committee. We'll share those monthly updates with you. So then that way, if there is something that piques your interest, we can dive into it a little bit deeper. And then, we can put things on the agenda as, the need arises from those individual committee members. But yeah, Jonathan, it's a point well taken. And I appreciate you bringing it up because, we do want you all to feel engaged in this process because we do value your input. And, a lot of you are specialists that have a lot of good thoughts to lend. Devin, please.
Yeah, thanks for that, Raymond. Excuse me, if I understand kind of the process, the reports will come and X day of the month. I mean, how much time is there basically between do you estimate between getting like kind of the larger transportation report, and should someone want to bring something as an agenda item to get that to you, how far in advance of the meeting, just to get a sketch of what that might look like?
So
yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Susan. I was just going to say, with your new meetings schedule that you just established, it actually should work out fairly well. The Transportation Commission packet is typically sent out on the second Friday. So if you're meeting the last Monday, there's probably going to be 1 to 2 weeks in between, so that when we send that out, if you were to notify us, by a couple days, that should be a sufficient ample time for us to be able to put something on the agenda for your upcoming meeting. Sorry, Suzanne, was that kind of what you were going to say?
Yeah, and I just think that knowing the regularity that we're going to have with our meetings, we can utilize obviously the off months to make sure that we are collecting and providing those updates, routinely. And then when we're obviously having those meetings, if something comes up, I'm not the kind of person that wants to spam your your inboxes, but if something is very pressing that is time sensitive, hearing from all of you this evening, it is important that we get that information to you. And sometimes things change rather quickly. And so you may get 1 or 2, emails per month, but I will try to limit those strongly to just once a month updates if it's appropriate. And then, please copy me on those communications. That way I can kind of keep track, as I've been doing from communications from all of you. I just kind of start a little note of make sure that these are on the agenda. And then when we're putting that agenda together, we can make sure that we have time like we have this evening to address them.
All right. I think we're good then. Thank you all.
All right. So moving along, I think just checking on time. We're just a tad behind, but not much. So this timeline is a little bit out of date because I just talked to Suzanne on Friday about potentially coming to your meeting in November. So we have another touch point opportunity in November. And we are thinking about that we'll probably need to extend the implementation program and action plan components of this into January, at least potentially a little bit further, but those should be pretty far along by then. So we'll kind of revisit that at your November and December meetings. So I wanted to spend some time walking through the speed management program. This is what we spent the bulk of the time since our last meeting working on. And I'm gonna probably unshare and then reshare so I can make sure I'm sharing the right screen. We do have an online story map that story map is just kind of the name that ArcGIS gives it. That is a really user-friendly interface to kind of walk everybody, the public included, everybody through what this program is, why Ann Arbor is developing a speed management program, what it is, where it's applicable, and then opportunities for input. So AECOM and Sarah's team really led the charge on this, and I just wanted to walk you all through it to show you what it looks like. This will be available publicly very shortly, I think. And if it's not already, I don't think it's linked to the website yet from the website, but it is pretty much ready to go. So we have why speed management. This kind of sets the stage for why we're focusing on speed so much. And I know that you all know that, so we won't belabor it, but we want to make sure that we're setting the stage for everybody. So a little bit about why we're talking about major streets. So this is what started out as the Major Streets Traffic Calming Program, but we decided as a team, and I think led by the city, that this needs to be, that's not the right terminology, that we need to be talking about speed management, because speed is what causes so many of the severe and fatal crashes. And so we developed this toolbox of potential infrastructure tools or traffic control tools that can help manage speeds on all the streets. So there's the local streets traffic calming program already, but those aren't the streets where so many of the severe crashes are happening. So what can we do on all of the streets, all of the major streets? So the tools are broken down into 4 categories here. Horizontal deflection, which is basically things that you drive around. Cross-section modification, which means changes to lanes, shoulders or medians, or the width of lanes. Vertical deflection, things that you drive over, or traffic control devices. So this is what we went through at the last meeting. And Seth, I know that Suzanne responded to you, but I wanted to thank you for all your feedback on that. We did incorporate a lot of your comments. We don't have as much detail in this version as what I showed you last time. But this should look pretty familiar, but it's now in an interactive format. You can even click on these examples, click on these resources for more information. So each tool has its own kind of page, so to speak, but you just keep scrolling through each of them. And then I want to point out, because it took me a while to figure it out, on the side, you can also jump to different tools. You don't have to memorize which number is which tool. It will tell you, it pops up what the tool is if you hover over it. There are 22 tools in all. So before I scroll through all of those, does anybody have any questions about what we've scrolled through so far? Okay. So we have, I don't think I want to go through tool by tool. Kind of want to jump to, and you don't have to scroll through top to bottom. You can jump to these different tabs here. So the Where in Ann Arbor page, so to speak, is an interactive map. And what we've done here is we have already identified the streets based on a priority that's based on the crash analysis and a safety score that we gave to each segment of the street. So you see it based on high, medium, low here. You can click on the street, whoops, a little finicky. You can click on the street segment and another pop-up comes up in the side, and then that tells you some of the street characteristics of that particular segment and which speed management tools are potentially applicable. So one thing I want to note is that the applicability is based on these street characteristics that are listed up here. So each street is going to have to be looked at individually, and not every tool is necessarily applicable for that street based on the existing characteristics. So for instance, curb extensions are really only appropriate where you do have on-street parking, and some of these streets might not have on-street parking, but we weren't able to go to that level of detail and customization. And really every one of these tools would have to be designed and reviewed by the staff. So this is just kind of a first brush. This is what is potentially applicable, and you can even click on one of those tools and it takes you back to the page in the toolbox. So you can get more information on it. Any thoughts or questions? All right.
I'm sorry, Stacy, on the, what are the tools? Not the tools themselves, but some of the kind of cross-referenced resource material that's aligned with them. I would just wonder if you could spend like a minute or two on that.
Sure, some of these, like the FHWA traffic calming primer. Sarah, do you want to chime in there?
Sure, absolutely. So for each of these tools, we tried to identify an example from a peer city that includes some data on how effective the tool was there. So for example, the one here is from William Street in Kalamazoo. And then a major resource that we used in general to get information about the different tools and their effectiveness, especially on major streets, was the FHWA traffic calming e-primer. And this has information, detailed information on each of the different tools that are included in the toolkit. So you can learn more about other case studies where they've been effective and just general information about each tool.
Thanks. Anything else, Suzanne, that you would want us to go into more detail on?
No, I just wanted everyone to make sure that they saw that. We wanted to make sure that we had that kind of peer example comparison. And again, to really focus in on best practices from other source information, such as Federal Highway. I believe NACTO may be referenced in there as well. So it just gives a good example of where we are getting our kind of research from.
Yeah, and we were also sure to include an Ann Arbor example where appropriate, so people can understand that this maybe isn't so new. They have seen it before and they have interacted with it. Devin?
Thanks. This is pretty swell so far. Two quick questions. I mean, one is the first one really to educate the public and garner feedback? Is that kind of what we're moving for because of the provider input?
Yes,
Okay.
I hadn't gotten to that part yet. So the provider input is kind of a work in progress, but for right now, what we're asking for questions of the public. So we've gone to 2 in-person public engagement events so far, one last Wednesday and Saturday, and then one upcoming this Wednesday. And we're trying to solicit questions that we can turn into FAQs that would go on this website. And then a process that we're still working through is developing a petition process so that we can incorporate community feedback into the selection of corridors that might receive these tools. So this is kind of our starting point, but the petition process would allow the city to collect feedback based on the lived experiences of people in Ann Arbor. And if, say, this section of Packard is really kind of a hot issue for the community, that might get bumped up based on the feedback they're hearing.
Okay, thanks for that. This looks great. The one thing I'll just throw out my kind of response to that's very helpful. Something that inevitably comes up a lot in the Equitable Engagement Steering Committee is how we continue to move beyond, digital surveys. And you've kind of alluded to some of that. It's just, I'll just be redundant here. It comes up a lot. There's so many people in this community who don't get that information, particularly sometimes, people from more marginalized communities. So how can we ensure that this information gets to them, particularly when it impacts their area? So I don't have an answer. It's just kind of more of a thing to throw out there, but I appreciate that.
Well, and just on at least this we're really calling an inform component to this process development is just getting people familiar that we are developing a program to address this. These are the tools. Sam Schwartz, Consultant Smith Group, had put together like a really neat interactive sort of game that we're taking to the libraries. Libraries are, very accessible to people by foot, by car, by bike, and by bus. So we've had some very positive interactions, but we are very cognizant of the fact that people who generally comment have time and have a privilege with that time to think about these sort of things. And so that is one way that we've kind of challenged ourselves to how do we make sure that we're reaching communities that may not have the same level of access as others. And so that is one of the pieces that, if people on this call have ideas, suggestions, or feedback on ways that we should be doing that, we're very open to that because we really want to build that into the process. That way it is really accessible in a lot of different ways and means.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah.
The one thing I have to say, and I'll shut up after this, is if maybe we could talk with Heather and even have just a very modified presentation of this with the committee, the engaged, and just get some feedback from all the people in that on how we can do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful just to reiterate what Suzanne was saying. Yeah, I think that we're all really open to hearing how to make that process better. And I think even the inviting public feedback into this process of where tools should be applied is tricky, to be not just responding to the squeaky wheel, but acknowledging that the public does have a lot of expertise in their own streets. And so just trying to strike that balance is a challenge. So eventually this portion of this website will include a link to that petition process. And currently we have a link to complete the form that solicits the questions that would turn into the FAQs and just general feedback too on the process.
Stacy, can you
Yeah.
say again about the petition process? I kind of zoned out or something about that.
Sure. Yeah. So this is not loading again, but the map that I showed earlier with the color-coded streets is kind of our starting point for, can you guys hear me? I think my connection is okay. So that's our starting point for the need of traffic or speed management. And then a petition process would be part of the, would be available as an opportunity for community members to kind of bump up a segment and to show community support for a segment and to show, I guess, the community identified need for speed management on that segment.
Okay, but it's not overall petition driven the way our small street calming.
Correct.
Driven. Okay.
Yeah, let me switch back to my PowerPoint because that this is the basic flow chart of the process for the speed management.
We're still seeing the story map.
Oh. All right.
I'm sorry, Julie. I
was just going to say the same thing. Perfect.
Yeah, I never know if I'm sharing the window or the program. All right. So you're seeing the process now?
Yes.
So the need score is what you saw on the map, the color-coded street segments. And then a community multiplier is what we were calling it, would be added to that need score to develop a final score that would lead to an annual project selection. And then the evaluation of the projects, which would include geometric analysis, coordination with AAA, ATA or other agencies or other departments, and the public engagement, and then through to final design. So the petition process is not the main driver. It's a component that we can add on to the needs score.
I just would hate for like crash data to be minimized in this equation. So I wouldn't want like a street that had fewer crashes, but lots of sort of outspoken neighbors to bump themselves up ahead of a greater need. So I don't know how we control that. Multiplier sounds a little bit too strong to me.
Yeah, that's probably not the best term because it doesn't actually multiply the need score. So maybe I just chose the wrong terminology there.
Like booster.
And that's actually the part that we're still figuring out. So, open to all your feedback on this. And yeah, booster maybe.
Yeah, bonus. Yeah, I was just going to chime in here a little bit. I appreciate the point, Julie, and again, I don't disagree with it. Where I think this originates from, and some of you have probably heard me say this in the past, is our experience with sidewalk program, where to us sidewalks are needed everywhere, but we're sometimes surprised by some of the opposition. So and quite frankly, as I think some of you know, some of those sidewalks have not been built as a result of that opposition. So we kind of felt like, well, for areas or that really want it, the needs are great in the city, and we know we can only do this incrementally. So having this sort of bonus where people can coalesce around an area that said, yes, I really want to see something here, then we have a lot of baked in community support. We have champions already kind of built into the process. So I think that's where the thought process was in this. But I appreciate your point as well. I
guess what I was thinking about the small streets program and how there are way more petitions than we can fund. And, you know, if we can only do one of these a year and you need the booster to get up to a high enough level where you can get chosen, then it seems like it does become the same kind of squeaky wheel issue. So I don't know, it's just something to think about. I don't know how much money is budgeted and how many projects will be able to go forward, but I would hate for, you know, it sort of being impossible to push a project forward unless the whole neighborhood was really organized behind it and advocating for it.
I really agree with Julie's point there, and picking up on the scenario that Raymond was talking about the neighbors that were against the safety improvement. Maybe a way of doing the community multiplier, whatever you want to call it, that's consistent with that is you can, through action, lower your neighborhood's priority for these improvements, but you can't raise them. So in other words, if you're a neighborhood that for some reason doesn't want sidewalks, okay, organize and we'll bump you down the priority list for sidewalks, maybe. But on the other hand, we're not going to wait until a neighborhood proactively organizes to get themselves bumped up.
That's an interesting suggestion. Brett?
Yeah, I'm curious, would this toolkit be applied to construction or, you know, resurfacing or reconstruction projects does it have to go specifically through this process in order to have access to the toolbox, or could this be applied to any reconstruction or resurfacing of a major street?
Yeah, I think that the tools are, sorry, city folk, feel free to jump in here, but the tools are kind of best practice tools, right? They can be used on any project. And so we're not saying that these speed management projects that are you know, coined as speed management projects are the only opportunities for those.
Yeah,
Yes,
it might be more of a question for the city staff, yeah, or council or city administrator.
Yeah, I think some of that's to be determined. I think that's one of the things we want to kind of get your feedback on. I think the thought, so there are multiple ways we can do this, right? So to the extent, or to what you're speaking to, Brett, if there's an existing capital project, let's say there's a water main that's going to be replaced and then there's going to be resurfacing as part of that. What we are doing as part of the CIP process right now is flagging the projects that are on tier 1 and tier 2 corridors and or on an all ages and abilities bike network. And we're baking that into the project description. We may not know the specifics. We may not know, for example, what safety countermeasures are baked into the project, but the idea, it's a signal to the project manager that when the time comes for design, that they will speak to the transportation team, they'll speak to others, they'll reference the plan to see what sort of appropriate countermeasures are appropriate, including tools in the speed management toolbox. A lot of what we're talking about here is really trying to forge our own path forward. You heard me say this kind of earlier, is not waiting for a capital project, right? So what are some of the retrofits we could do to an existing roadway? You know, like let's say, for example, 7th Street. You know, I often still get concerns about 7th Street, and I think a lot of those are, you know, founded in, you know, some of the behaviors that you see out there, some of the concerns. But let's say there's no capital project planned on 7th Street for the next 6 years, which is how far out our CIP goes. Well, in the interim, can we look at some of these speed management approaches on 7th Street? You know, can we look at some of the vertical and horizontal deflection devices that you're, you know, heard from Stacy about? So then that way we can achieve some of those safety outcomes by reducing the speed absent a major capital project. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they're kind of tangential and complementary to one another. But what we've always envisioned for what we're doing here today is really identifying a whole new slate of projects that can just move forward without a major rebuild as part of, you know, the backing behind it.
And one point I wanted to make toward to your comments, Julie, I think with the website, we're trying to make this very transparent as well. So things like, expectation of how many projects can happen per year. If we're able to pin that kind of information down, I think that should go on the website. But I guess another point, reason I bring that up is if you guys think that there's other information that should be incorporated into that, please give us that feedback once you've had a chance to really dig into it.
I would say maybe, and we haven't really done any of these projects yet, but an opportunity to include what projects are in work or in plan. I love the map. The map is fantastic, but then, then what? There's a lot of red on that, which I agree with. And so, but what could happen over the next 7 years of the CIP or even outside of the CIP?
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion that, having the tool, with our GIS professionals, we can easily make these kind of modifications, changes, and add like an attribute table on, hey, this is planned for construction in 2024, 2025. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions about this speed management program?
I'll just let everyone know that we are in the process of getting this up on the website, and obviously then that feedback tool will also be available. They're the same questions that we're asking folks in person right now, so we wanted to keep that consistent. And I believe we've had at least 70 interactions, touch points with people in person between the two events. So we've been able to garner a lot of good information already that we're translating back to Sam Schwartz and the team. And then using that information, like Stacy said, to develop FAQs and, look at other elements that we need to, amend or tweak.
Larry?
Yeah, I'm a little confused, and I think it's partly because I usually approach this from a different angle. In terms of bicycling, I usually approach it from what is needed for connectivity of the bicycle network and safety of the bicycle network. Here we're having a different approach, which is valid too, which is where are the safety problems and how do we address that? And it seems to me there's a need to identify what's an appropriate staff role and what's an appropriate role for input. As staff, you put together where most of the crashes and injuries are, and that's good. So it seems like identify that and then come to this committee and Transportation Commission with input on that list. And I mean, staff develops a priority list among that set of projects, and you get input from the commission and this committee on those priorities. And then once priorities are agreed upon, then what to do there is the thing where, again, staff can have some input, and then these committees and commissions can have some input too. So I'm just looking at the sequence of functions and input points about how to decide what to do, because what do we want to end up with is what do we want to do, right? So I'm just expressing a little bit of confusion about the approach here, I guess, and I look at it a little.
I think you cut off there a little bit at the end, but did anyone on the city side want to respond to Larry?
I'm sorry, can you restate I got a little choppy too on my side.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Just, I think there's a need to define what's appropriate for staff and then what's the appropriate input after that? I mean, their staff needs to lead on identifying the major safety issues. And then there's the issue of prioritizing those and then deciding what to do with those priority projects. So I just don't understand the approach here, and it's probably just me, but I don't quite understand the
No, it's, I mean,
functions.
if you're confused, it's probably not just you, and maybe taking a step back a moment. This speed management program that I just ran through is one component of what we're working with the city on. And it is, as Raymond described it a little bit ago, it's a program that enables them to kind of move forward without a big capital improvement project on elements that on streets where we do need to address speed. So this is kind of one, it gives them a venue for taking some action when it's not like a huge project. Another thing that we are working with the city on, though, is identifying an implementation program that will identify specific projects or specific streets that need to be addressed and what the scale and scope of those projects might be. So all of these are working together, and we're just showing you one piece of it right now. And when we kind of zoom out, you'll see a fuller picture of the breadth of projects that I think a lot of those other projects that we're talking about would be the bigger projects that they would need community engagement and committee feedback on to help figure out what happens on those streets.
Yeah, and just to supplement that, Stacy and Larry, I don't know if this is getting at what you're asking, but you know, when we look at the data will also help inform what the appropriate countermeasure is as well, right? So, you know, we can look at, you know, a lot of this exercise has been identifying the hot spots, but we haven't kind of looked under the hood about how those hot spots then translate into the countermeasure and what we'll propose there. So, you know, when we see that speed is, you know, a contributing factor, or if we see a lot of certain types of crashes, whether it involves bikes, peds, or vehicle to vehicle, we can then look at which appropriate countermeasure can address that negative behavior as effectively as possible. So I think, you know, it will be somewhat iterative, but at the same time, it also, you know, we really want the data to guide us in terms of having the appropriate countermeasure that's really going to address, you know, the behavior that we're trying to curb and trying to rectify. And maybe Cynthia, if you want to augment what I'm saying, since I'm pretending to be an armchair engineer here.
No, I mean, I think you covered that really well. But I think does anyone have any questions? Like, does that answer things, Larry, or do you still have some questions?
Well, I don't really understand everything, but it's probably just me. So I don't. I think we just keep going here and see if that clarifies my confusion.
My comment is kind of short. So Stacy asked about if there were metrics that we wanted in the story map. And I think it would be helpful if as many of the metrics that go into the decision making could be put there so that it was sort of transparent and it was more obvious to the public that it was sort of data driven to a greater degree than it was petition driven. You know, I noticed there were things on there about traffic volumes, and so that's great. I didn't get a good look to scan what all is in there, but if there could be information about, you know, average speeds and crashes and that sort of thing, I think that would be great.
Thanks, Julie. All right. We're certainly open to hearing more feedback on that throughout the rest of the meeting, but also in the weeks to come. So Suzanne referenced this already. We have a couple images here if anybody wasn't able to make it on Wednesday or Saturday, please try to join us this coming Wednesday. Smith Group, who's not on this call tonight, but they put in a lot of great effort to develop this interactive but tangible tool to allow people to kind of try out these different tools in the toolbox that you saw on screen. And so each of these foam pieces is to scale, and they can put a pedestrian refuge island in the middle of the street, or they can put a protected bike lane down the side of the street and use these little bike pieces or cars or people to navigate this new street design that they've laid out. Suzanne, anything you want to add?
I will just say that even though the weather was really unpleasant on Wednesday, we still had between like 20 and 25 people come and interact with the board, which I'm not gonna lie, was really challenging considering it was very breezy and rainy that day. But the quality of the conversations, we heard a lot of really good positive feedback regarding speeding being an issue, and that they were, glad that we were looking to address this. And again, this was really just to get people familiar with a program being created and to get them familiar with the different types of tools and just get them comfortable with some of the terminology so that we can all dialogue about it. And it was really, really exciting seeing Cynthia interact with some of the younger people on Saturday. The kids would just come up and like grab the cars and play around and like pick stuff up. It was just really great and I think very positively received.
And actually, Devin, to your point earlier about not everybody being able to engage online, I mean, there are these boards, but we also have 4x6 size toolbox cards for each of those tools that you see on the website. And so it has the same information in a tangible format that I think we could pass around and share with different organizations or libraries or whatnot to get that information out further. So again, this is an opportunity for the city to get feedback on the tools, but also then questions that people have that we can turn into FAQs. So I think we went through a lot of this throughout the last 40 minutes or so. Any final questions or feedback on either the process or anything that's missing? Brett, I see your hand up.
Is there any going to be any kind of feedback loop with what comes out of these 3 public engagement sessions? There's been 2 of them have already happened. Having gone through 2/3 of it, do you see any showstoppers or things that are making you think we need to go back and recircle and try something different?
My inclination is no. And I'm not just saying that, like the volume of comments that we did receive, like we did, handwrite, which we are transcribing. So we would make those available to all of you if you would like to read them. Some were, I received a 1-page double-sided handwritten note about Washington Street. So the next piece will be to like start flagging some of the specific roads or specific comments that kind of we can cluster into a theme. And then again, as Stacy said, I want to use if there are specific questions to put those together and put that on really the story map for the FAQs. It hasn't really been so much of the questions, which that's perfectly fine right now, but we do want to provide that information back to all of you in a summary. We did receive a 1-page typed comment, so I'm just going to scan that instead of retyping it. But I'm happy to make all of that available. Like I said, I do want to make this pretty transparent. These are public comments that we received on this, and it wouldn't be any different than the survey. But we will, I mean,
Okay.
not that I'm going to sanitize. If somebody listed their name, I'd probably remove their name, for their own anonymity. But make sure that we have their comment to the fullest extent that they provided it to us. So I'll make sure that we provide that information, summaries to this committee at our November meeting, if that would be appropriate.
Thank you. Yeah, I plan on attending on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it.
Hope for good weather. Bring the sunshine when you come.
It's at the library, right?
Yep, we're
think
at
so.
Mallett's Creek. Yes.
All right, so the last two items on my agenda are pretty quick. But as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we just wanted to give you a kind of an intro to what you'll be seeing more detail on in upcoming meetings. And we had talked about this a little bit last time, and I did take your feedback into account. We are looking at, for the annual report, looking at focusing not so much on the numbers and statistics, although I do think that's important to keep top of mind. So we would still provide detail, trend information, but then focusing on the past achievements of the achievements of the past year. And we do also have that in story map version. So I'm gonna go to that one and show you what that's looking like. This is really just a framework. Thank you, Stan. Really just a framework right now. The detail information is not on here yet. But we just wanted to make this a little bit more accessible and not like a PDF document that people had to download or find in hard copy somewhere. So we could still kind of talk about how to make this accessible for people who can't access it digitally. I think this could all be PDF'd and printed out still. There's that option with this kind of format. But so just basically, I'll run through the high level here. We have the crash trends, which would be a graphic, and then run through the different types of improvements that were made throughout the year with a high level statistic of what was done, and keeping a reminder on here as well of the key metrics from the plan. And then coupling that with a map so that people can see where those were done. And so that would go through, oh, and then also a before and after photo could be incorporated for anything that is, physically in the ground. And so we have a placeholder here for a set of bike network enhancements. We did actually we'll have to put the formatting of this, but we did actually get a testimonial already from one of the quick builds that was installed at Liberty and Stadium. So we'll make sure that that's more legible on the screen. So then the next section would run through the focus locations and behaviors. So this would focus on the tier 1, tier 2 corridor and tier 1, tier 2 intersection improvements, or improvements that were targeted for a specific behavior like left turns. So this might focus on the left turn traffic calming installations. And then it would finally bring it all together in one map so you can see everything that was done in the past year on one map. We also, though, want to make sure that we're including stuff that is not a capital improvement. And stuff that's not done necessarily by the city either. We want to capture everything that is Vision Zero related within the city. So this is where I would love feedback from you all on what should be incorporated into this section. Of course, I'm happy to take that feedback now, but maybe it's just also just plant a seed in your mind to think about what should be incorporated into an annual report. And you can provide that feedback to either Suzanne or me offline. And then this would include oh, sorry, Jonathan.
A few pages back when you have the bar graph about the injuries, fatalities. Could that be separated out by pedestrian, cyclist,
Yeah.
vehicle occupant?
We can do that. And then we thought the tail end of the annual report should be a look ahead to what's upcoming in 2023.
I love all the maps.
Great. Any other thoughts at first brush? All right, sorry for all the back and forth tonight. I will go back to my slideshow. We can, happy to take your input, like I said, tonight or in the coming weeks and months on what else should be included in that annual report. And we can send you that story map link so that you can flip through it, scroll through it on your own. And of course, we'll be making updates to it in the next upcoming month. So one final teaser or introduction. We've talked about this speed management program being kind of a way that the city can be a little bit more proactive and have tools that they can have a shorter lifespan in terms of getting from planning to development. And then there's the implementation program that I also mentioned that will kind of focus on other kind of larger or longer, the full lifespan of the capital improvements that were called for in the implementation, the long range transportation plan. And then there's safe systems, and that's basically how do we incorporate this into the day-to-day and the all of the projects that we can incorporate these tools into. So safe systems is about planning and designing in a way that anticipates human error in the design and operations of the street. And it's really about how do we make sure that when projects are happening, that we are thinking about how to make them designs that are more forgiving and that encourage slower speeds and safer speeds and more multimodal system overall. So the top line here, what is safe systems, is kind of the textbook definition of safe systems and captured in one sentence. And so what we're going to be working with the city on is how do we actually make that happen. And I think the city is actually doing a lot of this now and doing it very well. But we want to look at all the different opportunities to institutionalize safe systems. So we're going to, what does that mean functionally? We're going to be looking at how streets are designed. It is still about focusing on the highest need areas that we've talked about a lot. And then making sure that safe designs are routine and not one-off projects, which I think has come up a couple times tonight. So we have a lot of work to do with the city to kind of dig into how do things actually function now and where do we see opportunities to change things, either in terms of the way projects are selected or scoped or designed. So it's gonna, for our scope within this, our mini scope within this component of the project is looking at the CIP framework and the process. And what I just alluded to, the project scoping, the project design, and even the public engagement process. So Devin, I think we would definitely welcome your committee's input on that. I mean, everybody's, but I know that you guys are focusing on that. So we'll have more to come on that. I know this isn't a lot to react to, but just wanted to let you guys know what we're working on. And I think that we are actually well within our time. So I think we can open it up now to public comment, or maybe I should pause for a second and see if there are any other questions or comments from the committee. All right, I'll hand it over to Raymond.
Yeah, Stacy, I do have one thing I want to mention. Some of you may have heard or seen or been involved with a survey that was launched last week. This was this partnership with Michigan Fitness Foundation. We were not satisfied with how that survey came to be and kind of the tone it was taking. So we took it down pretty quickly. And we are reassessing our participation in that initiative. So stay tuned, there'll be more coming in the future, but there have been a couple things that kind of question whether we're going to continue to participate in that or not. So I just wanted to let you all know first and foremost, because it's, you know, you've been helping us with that effort, but I'm sure some of you who saw that survey probably weren't very satisfied with it either. And we share some of that dissatisfaction, and we're trying to figure out what the best path forward, and maybe that path forward means to discontinue participation in it. So I'll pause there and see if any of you have any thoughts on that survey, if you have any reservations about what I'm suggesting, or anything to that effect.
So yeah, I find it kind of frustrating. It did seem like we were kind of at cross purposes, and I felt like because they were representing a broader area, was it the whole state? You know, that we didn't really have leverage to make it what would work well for us.
Yeah, the survey was, you know, we pushed it out through our channels at their request, but it's supposed to be replicable for other communities. We just didn't feel like it struck the right tone for the way we do outreach. Just some of the way the questions were worded and the way some of the responses were even, you know, they were kind of confrontational, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree.
And, you know, the funny part is we had raised a lot of those alarm bells early before it was even posted. Based on our initial read, we give credit to Suzanne in particular, who was like, time out, this ain't gonna work. And they said, yeah, this is how we did it before, and trust us. And so we did, and then it kind of blew back on us pretty hard, and rightfully so. I mean, we are kind of the gatekeepers of that. But I think it has caused us to really reflect. You know, some of you saw some presentations early in this process as well from the same group, which raised some questions for us. So there's a couple things that we feel have been some missteps. So yeah, it's unfortunate. We thought there was really good alignment on paper in terms of what we're trying to do with this group here with Vision Zero, and then using this statewide initiative to augment some of the messaging and education and outreach. But I think the approach is perhaps more divergent than we had initially anticipated. So, so that's where we're at. There'll probably be, you'll hear more from us at a future meeting. It may even affect our meeting schedule. I know one of the meetings in November and December, no, I'm kidding. Okay, never mind. we still have enough material to go over with you, with or without Michigan Fitness Foundation. So yeah, so just wanted to bring that to your attention.
So now we're at the public comment period. I don't know if there are members of the public on the call.
I don't see any callers that aren't panelists, so we are probably good. But since we do have a couple minutes still, if anyone has any other thoughts among the committee that you want to discuss, please. Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious about if part of the process for the speed management is regular data collection, and if that's just going to be done with normal, whatever, however you guys normally do it for engineering stuff, or if that's, or if there's a means of like sort of having some sort of live read on like what speeds are. Can you pull up Google Maps and look at the traffic and see how fast it's going? Just to sort of show like we did this here and it worked. And I mean, apart from obviously having the tools, but what are the tools to measure the tools, the effectiveness of the tools?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I know for this year one quick builds, we did a series of baseline data collection. Again, Suzanne helped kind of gather that. We worked, for example, with the police department on deploying some of the speed reader signs, and those collect the data that we were going to house and kind of create, again, that baseline data, and then do a similar deployment after implementation so that we could measure their effectiveness. It's definitely something that we, strive to achieve, where if we have to go out with tube counters or camera counters and make sure we try to be as multimodal as possible, that's definitely within our mindset. I will say, sometimes it gets difficult, right? Weather can affect travel patterns, especially non-motorized. We've run into that. We had a safe routes to school traffic count we did that was taken on Labor Day, I think. And so we had to throw those counts out because the person who collected it wasn't paying attention to the holiday schedule. So it's, sometimes it's just making sure that the data is good so that we get good baseline data. And then, take good corresponding follow-up data. There are some big data sets out there that we have looked at. They just are so cost prohibitive. So there's a data source called Streetlight Data. I've been in discussions with them for a couple of years, and they're quoting me 6 figures per year to get access to their data. And, while I think we would put that data to good use, that's a really hefty ticket price. The nice thing about Streetlight Data is they aggregate like cell phone data or Bluetooth ping data from vehicles. So it's big data, right? And it's really helpful because it's system wide. You can really view it 24/7, 365, as opposed to like these snapshots that we take with tube counters. So if we can solve for that, like if you all can convince MDOT to buy state licenses for all of the municipalities, or the MPO to pitch in and buy it, because that's what we did in Nevada. The Michigan Department of Transportation bought it for all of the MPOs. And then we didn't have Streetlight, we had INRIX, which is another big data set. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but the point is simply, yes, we hear you. We need to collect good data to evaluate the effectiveness both before and after. What exactly data set we're going to use is probably still to be determined. We'll probably rely on some of the historic stuff we've done, which are tube counters, or sometimes we even just go out and do tax sheets if we have some interns, worst case scenario, but we'll definitely do something. But to your point too, we also need to make sure we're collecting speed data, because for speed management, that's how we're going to measure effectiveness. All right, any other thoughts from the group? Going once, going twice. My wife just had her big fundraiser where there was an auction. So I'm all jazzed up about that. All right. Well, on that note, third time gone. We'll go ahead and pull this meeting to a close. I do again want to thank you all for your time and your input. You know, believe it or not, you really are helping influence this process. You really are giving us valuable direction. And we're hopeful that you're going to find these end products very, you know, satisfying, engaging in terms of achieving the outcomes that we hope to achieve, because we really are trying to operationalize this, trying to put it into motion. You know, you all know that we're also out there shaking trees for money. We submitted a $22 million grant to the federal government for Safe Streets for All, specifically to like take this stuff to the next level, put it on steroids and really just get it amped up and implemented. So we're out there, we're trying to, you know, get this stuff working. We're putting it into the CIP process. So it may not feel like we're doing a lot of change just yet, but it's incremental and we're baking it into the processes. And I think you're really going to start seeing some systematic changes and paradigm shifts in a lot of the way this stuff is working. So we appreciate you sticking with us. We appreciate you really helping guide this process, because I'm really confident that the outcomes are going to achieve what we hope to achieve. So thank you all.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.